Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, out of Voice of Radio. So today we need to take a look at, whoa, a new Ace Spec. Yeah, that's right. There's a new Ace Spec. It's come to town, and I tell you what, this new Ace Spec looks good, ladies and gentlemen. This looks good. The problem is, we have a lot of Ace Specs, and a lot of them are good. Obviously, this is coming in Super Electric Breaker over in Japan, and when it appears over this side of the pond, it is going to be in Surging Sparks. Is it any good? Well, what we've got here is Amulet of Hope. So I hope so. Okay, last one of those. So, what do we do here? Well, it's a tool, and if it's attached to your Pokemon that gets KO'd by damage from an attack, and it must be damage from an attack, you get to go and search your deck for any free cards and put them into your hand. Important to note here, any Pokemon, benched or active, can use this and take advantage of it, but it must be KO'd by damage from an attack. And this immediately is going to make a lot of you go, well, hang on a second, that's Radiant Jirachi. Yeah, you're right, it is. It is Radiant Jirachi's ability on an Ace Spec. That's absolutely right. The thing is, Radiant Jirachi has to be in the active. This is any Pokemon. Although, you could whack this on a Radiant Jirachi, and sure, it's your one of Radiant, and sure, it's your one of Ace Spec, but you just get there, you know, flipping with Astral Misfortune over and over and over again, and, you know, if you flip heads, yay! And then if you don't flip heads, well, that's alright too, because when your opponent knocks it out, you go and search for 6 cards. And frankly, if you can search for 6 cards and you don't win the game, you weren't winning that game. Now, another fun little side note here, and this is very important. Your opponent takes the KO, and you get those cards coming into your turn. Because, of course, normally what would happen here is if you go and search for 3 cards, or when it really works, 6 cards, your opponent cannot play an I&O fast enough here. They literally will not be able to play an I&O fast enough. There is no way they are letting you have this. There's no way they're letting you have those 6 cards. Or more often than not, 3 cards, let's be honest. But because your opponent takes a KO at the end of their turn, it comes into your turn, and at that point, it's basically too late for your opponent to mess with your hand. But what they can do is they can mess with your Ace Spec. Obviously here, like, there will be times your opponent will KO the Pokemon this is attached to. Of course they will. But there's also going to be a lot of times your opponent goes, Lost Vacuum. Now, to be fair, when we get to the next rotation and Lost Vacuum rotates, maybe it's going to be a bit more awkward, but right now they're just going to go, Lost Vacuum, and then you're not going to have your tool anymore. We've seen this a lot. We saw this at the weekend at the Dortmund Regional Championships with, you know, there was one game, I think it was even in the final, you know, where we had Legacy Energy stopping KOs being taken, and Ryuki just got around it. Just KO'd it with damage or things of that nature, damage counters, you know, rather than actually attacking into it. Basically just said, no, just not letting you do that. That's not working. I'm not letting you have Legacy Energy. And that was a special energy. So, yeah. I don't think there's going to be that often this, and that's my biggest issue with this card. I actually think it's a phenomenal Ace Spec. I think it's a ridiculous card. But I also think there are going to be a bunch of situations here where you put this down on your opponent, and your opponent goes, hang on a second, no. And the thing is, nowadays, it's really easy to go and search your one-of item card. It hasn't always been that way, but it is right now. A lot of decks are playing Arven, so Arven can go and get this. Jobs are good. A lot of decks are playing Pidgeot, so that'll go and get it quite nicely. We have ways to go and search out our one-of item cards, and not every deck is going to be able to do it. There will be times this works. That's not my point. My point is that there might be too many times where it doesn't work that this would frankly put me off. Because if we compare that to other cards, for instance, something like Prime Catcher, you are going, and this is the gold standard now when it comes to Ace Specs, Prime Catcher you're going to get use out of. It's going to give you use because you play it, and then it's gusting, and it's there, and it's good. Take something like, although it doesn't actually see much play right now, take Ancient Drum. You play it, you draw cards, or Awakening Drum, the Ancient Ace Spec. You're going to draw cards. But then again, Hero's Cape sees a bunch of play and control variants, and that could just be removed, and yet that sees a bunch of play. So maybe there is hope. What deck can use this? Honestly, anything. Now, combo decks are going to be a pretty big deal. So, for instance, we saw Golden Go have a pretty nice run to top 4 at Dortmund with Yeller, who actually got second at Dortmund last season. So, you could say here, well, hang on a second, Golden Go. Because, of course, with Golden Go, you're constantly trying to get a Golden Go set up, while also at the same time making sure you've got enough energy in hand to discard. That can sometimes take a lot of effort. So, use something like this to go and guarantee the cards you need to get the KO. And on the one hand, yeah, on the other hand, you've got a lot of draw. And we saw from Yeller at the weekend that they didn't really need that. Stage 2 decks, take something like Charizard, for instance. Charizard gets KO'd, but you can go and search for any free cards. And all of a sudden, you're definitely getting a Charizard EX again next turn. And then you've got another card to play with. But the problem here is you're always looking at what am I losing? I've just said about Stage 2 decks being able to refresh their Stage 2 sounds awesome. Well, you could say that about Dragapult. But there's no way Dragapult's going to play this, because Sparkling Crystal going and, reducing that attack cost down to 1, way too big of a deal. There's no way you're playing it over this. Essentially, there are a lot of decks out there. Like Dragapult is going to play Sparkling Crystal. That's going to be a thing. Lugia is going to play Legacy Energy. That's just a thing. So, what you're looking for here is decks that don't necessarily need a particular Ace Spec. Decks that can use anything. So, you're hoping that players look at this card and go, well, I like it over Prime Catcher, and I like it over Unfair Stamp. So, you know what? This is going to work, and I'll go and play it. But that is asking a lot. Unfair Stamp, your opponent takes a KO, you put him down to a 2-fair hand, and it's one of those things where it's going to work, as long as you can find it, of course. Your opponent takes a KO, you play this, and got a 2-card hand. Unfair Stamp is gonna work. Where, Prime Catcher, you go and grab a Pokemon off the bench. It's gonna work. Here, there will be games where your opponent gets rid of it. And then, of course, it's damage from an attack. So, obviously, nowadays, we got our old friend Dusknoir. Well, if this is on a Pokemon that is in Dusknoir range, like, for instance, Radiant Jirachi, for argument's sake, well, yeah, Dusknoir's definitely going to take it out. Dusknoir's going to KO it, and you're going to lose, your Ace Spec for the game, and you're not going to have gotten anything out of it. Players can try a similar thing with Dragapult, dropping damage counters, for instance, or they can just go after your bench while they try and draw Lost Vacuum, and as soon as they draw Lost Vacuum, it's over. And you see where I'm going with this. This is my big issue with the card. I think it is a phenomenal card. I think searching any free cards will often give you everything you need. Go and get the Pokemon you need, the energy you need, and a boss's orders to guarantee game next turn. That's absurdly good. I love that. My issue is that it can be played around in a lot of the ways I've just shown you, and some others beside, and there are other Ace Specs which are probably going to end up being a little more deserving, and you put all of that back together, and look, I'm giving it 4 Wassies. I think it's a great card. I legitimately think it is a great card. But I do think it has glaring issues in terms of it can be played around and there are others that are forcing their way onto the list, and that's why I give it 4 Wassies. And I think, if we didn't have all the other good Ace Specs around, this would be an automatic slam dunk, no question inclusion in every single deck. Like, if this had been in the first set with Ace Specs, and we didn't have Prime Catcher, which I know is a big if, go back to Temporal Forces, take out Prime Catcher, for instance, and put this card in there, and it sees a ridiculous amount of play. There's still other good Ace Specs in that set, don't get me wrong, but if you swapped around Prime Catcher and this was in Temporal Forces, I think it sees an absurd amount of play. It becomes your general go-to Ace Spec. But it's not. It's several sets later, and that's my point. Right, there we go, ladies and gentlemen. That's what you need to know, and now it's over to you guys. Tell me what you think about this Ace Spec. Do you think it's going to end up seeing a whole bunch of play, or do you think that it's, just going to be, unfortunately, outstripped by others? Go nuts in the comment section, but be nice! And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at @TheWasi. That's where we talk about Pokemon and a whole bunch of other card games. And please do consider checking out patreon.com/PTCG Radio, where you can support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all kinds of fun things. But by far the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.